There was an old man named Walter who lived alone in a small wooden cottage at the edge of a quiet countryside village called Hollow Brook. He was known by everyone as the man who rarely spoke but always noticed. His eyes, though tired, still carried a spark of curiosity. Walter had lived in the village his entire life. He had seen children grow up, families move in and out, and seasons change one after another. People often said, Walter remembers things no one else even noticed. Each day, Walter woke up with the sun. He would light a fire, warm a pot of tea, and sit by the window that overlooked the meadows, watching the fog lift from the hills. Birds chirped, cows grazed, and the village carried on in its usual, peaceful rhythm. Nothing strange ever happened in Hollow Brook. But then, one night, Walter had a dream, a strange, heavy dream that made him sit up in bed, sweating and confused. In the dream, he saw the village covered in mist, thick gray mist that swallowed the houses, the trees, and even the sky. There was a sharp sound like a whistle or a distant cry, and then everything turned silent. He saw the faces of the villagers, motionless and still like statues. And then he heard a voice, a whisper, faint but clear, saying, "It begins with the wind." He woke up before dawn, heart pounding in his chest. Walter didn't believe in signs or stories, but this dream was different. It didn't fade like others. It stayed, like a shadow at the back of his mind. The next morning, Walter walked into the village. He passed the bakery, the schoolhouse, the well in the square. Everything looked normal, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He told no one about the dream, not yet. They'd just say he was old and imagining things. Still, he began paying attention. He listened to the wind and noticed how the birds flew in strange patterns. The dog near the butcher's shop barked at nothing in particular, and the river, Walter stood by the riverbank one evening and noticed that the water flowed slower than usual. It had a smell he couldn't quite describe, like metal or something old. A few days later, the dream returned. This time, it was longer. The fog came again, this time darker. The voice whispered louder, "It begins with the wind. Then the ground will speak." Walter woke up gasping. Something was happening. He could feel it now, not just fear, but a sense of urgency. He needed to find out what the dream meant. He decided to speak to Eleanor, the librarian. She was one of the few people in the village who took him seriously. He walked to the library the next morning. Eleanor, a kind woman in her 60s, welcomed him warmly. "Walter, haven't seen you in a while." "I had a dream," he said plainly. She gave him a curious look. "What kind of dream?" He told her everything, about the mist, the voice, the wind, the stillness. Eleanor didn't laugh. She nodded thoughtfully and went to the back of the library. She returned with an old, dusty book titled Legends and Warnings of Hollow Brook. They opened it together, and Walter's hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. And there it was, on page 137, The Whispering Fog. The passage described a legend over 100 years old. According to it, the village once faced a mysterious silence that came with fog. Animals stopped moving, water turned thick, and the wind carried whispers no one understood. The legend said the fog was a warning, and if ignored, it would lead to the sleeping sickness, a state where people fell asleep and didn't wake up. Walter looked at Eleanor. "No one talks about this. Most people don't believe in old stories," she said. That night, Walter couldn't sleep. He sat by the fireplace, thinking, what if it was all just a coincidence? But deep down, he knew it wasn't. The dream, the whispers, the signs, they were real, and they were pointing towards something coming soon. The next morning, he went to the village meeting. Once a month, the townspeople gathered in the community hall to discuss village matters. Walter hadn't spoken at one in years, but this time he stood up. "I know what I'm about to say may sound strange," he began, "but I believe something is coming, something dangerous." People turned to look at him puzzled. "I had a dream, twice now, about the village covered in fog," a voice said. "It begins with the wind, and strange things have been happening. The birds are restless. The river has changed. Something is wrong." There was silence in the room. A few people shifted in their chairs. One man laughed lightly, but Eleanor stood up. "I believe him," she said, "and I found something in the old books. It's happened before." The mood shifted. The mayor, Mr. Howard, cleared his throat. "Well, dreams are dreams, but we'll keep an eye out." That night it began. The wind howled louder than usual. The trees bent. The air grew colder, and by morning the fog had rolled in. It was just as Walter had seen in the dream, thick and unnatural. People woke up to find their animals restless, their gardens ruined by wind, and their houses damp with strange moisture. Walter walked through the fog, heart heavy. He knew it wasn't just weather. The village was in danger, but he didn't know how to stop it. He went back to Eleanor. She handed him the book again. "There's more," she said. "It says the one who hears the voice can stop the silence, if they remember the song of the land." "What does that mean?" Walter asked. "I don't know, but I think it's you." Walter sat in the library, thinking hard. And then, like a memory from long ago, he remembered. As a child, his grandmother had sung him a song, an old melody passed down by elders in the village. It was soft and sad and spoken in a language that no one used anymore. She called it the Song of the Land. He hadn't sung it in over 60 years. He stood up and walked to the edge of the village, to the field that met the forest, where the fog was thickest. He closed his eyes and began to hum the melody. Then he sang the words he barely remembered. His voice cracked. The wind pushed against him, but he kept singing. And something began to shift. The fog swirled faster, then slower, then began to rise, pulling back like a tide. The trees straightened. The birds began to chirp again. The air grew lighter. The silence cracked open, and sound rushed in like water through a broken dam. People came out of their homes. They looked around in awe. The fog was disappearing. The sun began to shine again. Walter stood there, tears in his eyes, whispering the last line of the song. The village was safe. From that day on, the people of Hollow Brook remembered what had almost been forgotten. And Walter, the quiet old man at the edge of the village, was no longer just the man who noticed things. He was the one who listened, believed, and saved them all. Stories aren't just for entertainment. They're one of the most powerful tools for learning a language. When you listen to a story like the one you just heard, you don't just hear words, you feel them. You see them in action. You understand how they fit into real situations. That's exactly how we learn to speak fluently. Not by memorizing long vocabulary lists or grammar rules, but by hearing words in context, over and over, until they feel natural. Think about it. Did you notice how many useful, real-world phrases and words appeared in the story, even though it wasn't a textbook lesson? Words like edge, fog, urgency, shift, gasping, and swallowed. These are words you might not practice in a classroom, but they appear in real life, in movies, books, and conversations. When you listen to stories and repeat the sentences out loud, you're training your brain to remember how real English sounds. Let's talk about listening and repeating. This is the method I recommend most. When you hear a sentence, pause the video and say it aloud. Try to copy the tone, the rhythm, the way the words flow. Even if you don't say it perfectly, you're building muscle memory for your mouth, your tongue, and your brain. That's fluency practice. For example, when Walter said, "Something is wrong," say that aloud. Feel how short and strong it is. You could use that same phrase in your daily life when something doesn't seem right. Something is wrong with my phone. Something is wrong with this document. See how useful it becomes. Also, stories teach you how to say things emotionally. The sentence, "I know what I'm about to say may sound strange," is a polite way to introduce something unusual. It's great for public speaking, meetings, even casual conversations. Saying it gives you time to explain yourself and prepares your listener. You could use it when sharing a new idea at work or in a group. "I know what I'm about to say may sound strange, but I think we should try it this way." Then there was the line, "He told her everything," about the mist, the whispers, the signs. That rhythm, listing ideas in a dramatic buildup, is common in storytelling and even in emotional real-life speech. Try copying it with your own topics. "I told him everything about the late nights, the hard work, the pressure." These patterns are gold for fluency. Words like urgency and trembled carry feeling and meaning. Urgency means a strong need to act quickly. For example, there was a sense of urgency in her voice. You could use that at work or when describing any stressful situation. Trembled means to shake slightly from emotion or cold. His hands trembled before the speech. Saying such words in full sentences gives your speaking style depth. Then there's fog. It's a simple word, but one full of imagery. You can use it both literally and metaphorically. Literally, the fog made it hard to see while driving. Metaphorically, my mind was in a fog after the exam. Stories teach us how to use these double meaning words naturally. Another beautiful word from the story is whisper. He heard a whisper in the wind. But you can also say, "She whispered a secret to me," or "There's a whisper of doubt in his voice." The word gives emotion, softness, and tone. Learning this in a story helps you remember how it feels, not just what it means. Swallowed is another strong word. In the story, the fog swallowed the houses. That's dramatic. You can use swallow literally. He swallowed the pill, or metaphorically, she was swallowed by fear. Notice how a simple word becomes so expressive just by hearing it in a story. Stories are also great for learning phrases, not just individual words. One great example was, "It stayed like a shadow at the back of his mind." You can use that sentence structure to talk about anything that won't go away. That memory stayed like a shadow at the back of my mind. Practicing this out loud makes your speaking more fluent and expressive. You might have noticed how natural the dialogue sounded too. "I had a dream," or "I believe something is coming." These are real, direct sentences. They are the kind you can use anywhere. That's why repeating sentences from stories makes you more confident. You're not just learning to say something, you're learning to say it the right way. Even the emotion in the sentences helps. When Walter sings at the end to save the village, the sentence was, he stood there, tears in his eyes, whispering the last line of the song. That sentence teaches three useful things: description, what someone is doing; emotion, how they feel; and action, what's happening. You can use a similar pattern. She stood there, hands in her pockets, staring at the sky. Try building your own version and say it aloud. It will train your speaking to be vivid and clear. Now let's talk about why stories work so well. When you read or listen to a story, your brain becomes active in many ways at once. You're not just understanding vocabulary, you're feeling emotion, picturing scenes, and connecting words to images. That's why you remember sentences from a story more than from a list. You feel them, you connect with them, and the best part, you start using the phrases in your daily life without even realizing it. That's how fluency happens. You might find yourself saying, I couldn't shake the feeling, or it stuck with me, just like in the story. And when someone asks how you learned it, you won't remember the rule, you'll remember the story. So if you want to improve your English, keep listening to stories like this one. Play them again. Speak along. Pause and repeat the sentences that stand out to you. Notice the words that carry emotion, movement, and expression. And don't forget, reading stories is just as important as listening. When you read and speak together, your brain learns twice as fast. That's why many fluent speakers are also good readers. Reading teaches structure, grammar, and vocabulary in a natural way. You don't need to understand every word, just enough to keep going. Over time, the patterns stay in your head. If you like this story, we have many more on this channel, and every one of them is written with real English in mind. Simple, clear, emotional, and full of phrases you can use every day. If your goal is to speak better English, then stories are your secret weapon, and we're here to help you every step of the way. So make a habit. One story a day. Watch it, read it, repeat it, speak aloud. Make it your practice. Make it your fun. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going. Thank you for watching. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below what your favorite part of the story was. And tell us, what word or sentence will you use today in your own English speaking? You've taken one step closer to fluency. Keep reading, keep speaking, keep believing.